Hi everyone, I'm Howard from ForderLearnToFly. I have a Twitch channel where you can come and interactively come and fly with us, learn lessons, chat about your home cockpit setup, software, hardware. But the real fun I'm seeing here is making these videos afterwards. After a session is over and I've used this presentation, it takes a few days to build these presentations, but I've got to know an airplane deeper. Myself, the gratitude of getting to know an airplane that you'll never get to fly in real life, like the Spruce Goose, and be able to confidently handle it in all phases of flight is the reward in itself. So thank you for joining me. Let's continue on and let's go find out about this gentle giant. Oh my gosh, this plane is so much fun to fly. It really is a beast. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with you here in this video. Leave us your comments. Let us know what your thoughts are as you try to fly this plane in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Let's get started. I'll start it with a disclaimer, as I do with all of these video lessons that we've done. Obviously, I'm not an expert on the Spruce Goose. I've studied the manual inside out, the only manual available. This about 150 pages of a manual that's been reprinted with permission on the Spruce Goose. We'll talk about this in a minute, but I've got a lot of my material out of here. There is no manual that comes with the Spruce Goose in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So I had to go and buy this one, but it's fascinating because it's the original flying manual that came, that they made with the plane. So my disclaimer, I'm not a CFI, everybody, but I do love teaching. I've been a teacher by profession with a number of teaching certificates. And I like learning something inside out and then figuring out a simpler way to teach others how to use it. And that's what I'm doing here with every new plane that we have. There's been a whole series of new ones for Microsoft Flight Simulator that came with the 40th anniversary, the free upgrade for Microsoft Flight Simulator. A number of enhancements to many areas, but certainly all the extra planes that they've added, and we've covered some of those already in previous YouTube videos. Go check them out, and if you want to learn to fly those planes. And the whole idea is I want you to get confident with the plane. We're not going to become experts. We're not going to become engineers, and you certainly won't be able to get a real pilot's license doing these kind of lessons. But it will help you to understand the plane better and to let you fly something you'd never be able to fly in real life. And that's what's cool about this. It's not just spawning on a runway, give it full throttle and hope everything works. That's not the purpose behind these lessons. It's to get to understand the plane better, understand the engineering feat behind it all. This was an amazing engineering feat, worth many millions of dollars at the time, of both the government's money and of Howard Hughes's money. And so this is really legendary. The fact that it only flew once is the part that's really sad. It was actually kept operational for 10 years after that, but still, it only flew once. And then now it's in a museum. Even today, you can go and see and be inside the Spruce Goose. Let's go take a look at it. So the background of it, 1942. Two people were actually working on this. One, of course, was a designer of magnificent boats at the time, Henry Kaiser. Howard Hughes and him, they both created the largest flying boat right up until, what, April 13th, 2019, they created, the Strato launch first flew on April 13th. I'm not sure if that continued on, but that was the biggest wingspan. Anyway, I think it was 328 feet, where this one was 320. So, I mean, very comparable anyway. This is an actual picture from the museum. They've now got, of course, a ladder platform, plexiglass walls, and you can walk in and out of the main body, look down through the cavernous tail end, the cargo end, look up towards the flight deck up here, of course, and see how it looked. Those of us who were members of Evergreen Aviation, and I'm a pilot also, we got to, at after hours, we got to go and sit in the pilot's seat, in Howard Hughes's seat, and just feel what that's like. And that was awesome. I should have had a picture taken of me sitting there. You never forget the visual, but and then now it did come out. This plane did come out in Flight Simulator X, FSX, and I flew it there. There's a YouTube video on that from years ago. Very simple stuff, very simple graphics, very simple flight model. Not much to do with it. And we were thrilled at the time that we could actually get in one and fly. Now here in Microsoft Flight Simulator, the realism that we have, the photorealism of everything that's working properly, the cowl flaps, the propellers, the propeller levers, everything is working the way it should. Now, there's some switches still don't work. There's some panels that still have in-op stuff, of course. And this plane back in the day would fly with 2 pilots and 2 engineers. All right, and that's how it flew. And there was transfer back and forth to the engineer sitting at like a NASA control center. And we'll show you that in a minute. But let me just, talk about this page here. Let's just get an idea of what we're working with here. And I'll get out of the way here for a second. So the largest flying boat, the whole idea was to cross the Atlantic carrying 150,000 pounds, whether it be fully equipped troops or 2 30-ton Sherman tanks. It started out as the HK-1 because of the 2 last names, Kaiser and Hughes. And as Hughes continued on with his own money and continued on with the project, it just became the H-4, using just Hughes' last name. And this is the name that stuck to today. So you can see in here there was a number of people involved, and then a whole crew of people making all this stuff to make this happen. Hamilton Rhodes made the birch wood laminate. So this is why it was called the Spruce Goose. As many of you, if you've seen the movie, you saw what this is all about. I'll make mention of the movie later on at the end of this presentation. But when you get, this name that Congress gave it, the Spruce Goose, as they called it, is actually made mostly of birch. I think there could be at 1% is actually made with spruce. But, the whole point is they designed this special laminate that, it's called the Duramold process, where it's similar to what plywood is today. But they made this from scratch back then for the whole thing because the war effort needed aluminum. They needed, and also for weight gains, but the war effort needed they said, if you can build this thing without using up all our metal, then go for it. And he did. And that's why it actually is a wooden flying boat back in the day. There's also concerns about weight too. So this is a very light and durable material they used when they were finished. All right. Flying boat. Some called it the Flying Lumberyard. Yeah, it was a few names that it got. And certainly there's a movie made about it called The Aviator. And I'll make mention of that near the end of this presentation. I'll show you a picture of that. So how big was it really? When you take a look at this, how big was it? Well, there's a picture of me standing in front of the real thing. That's big. I mean, that's the hatch door that's just above the waterline. That's the anchor line behind my back there. And way up top there is the cockpit. And that's the body of the thing. One single hull made for water only. It's not amphibious, it's water only. It's a boat, and it looks like a boat. It's a flying boat, and that's it. So we got the idea of what it can do. Fabric-covered control surfaces. That's, everything is made of wood except the actual control surfaces. And back in the day, a lot of planes were made out of fabric-colored structures. So there's nothing wrong with that. Now take a look at the weight here. It weighs 400,000 pounds fully loaded. Fully loaded. That's not empty weight. And fully loaded head out. And all of the charts and the performance charts I've been reading about and interpolating inside the manual all talk about at gross weight, 400,000 pounds. But many times they were doing tests at 350,000 pounds. And in the back of this book, plenty of charts, as is with any POH, plenty of charts to show us performance criteria so that we can figure out speeds and feeds and all the operational environment that we have to work with. Pretty cool stuff. And I've been pouring through this manual. I've spent many hours with it already, as I do with all POHs. So the technical specs, first flight was November 2nd, 1947. 1947. The model number, as you saw now, it became the Hughes H-4. Flying boat is the classification. There's stuff that you can read about, but you heard about gross weight. The service ceiling, 20,900 feet, so 21,000 feet. They never got there. I mean, this was all in flight test models. They never actually got there. Of course, they only got, what, a few feet off the ground? I don't know, 80 feet off the ground? It's hard to tell. It's such a big airplane. You see the gap while it's flying in the real video, and you just think, how high is that off the ground for whatever period of time? It's historic, of course, but they never did test the service ceiling. They never did actually take troops across the Atlantic. It's really sad to hear that. They spent all this time, money, and years to make this all happen. And as Howard Hughes mentioned to Congress, I've got my reputation all rolled up in this thing. And so, you know, like the whole idea was that never actually did what it's supposed to do. All right, so check your throttle bindings first, everybody. Here in the flight simulator, you can see in here what I've done. It's got 4 levers inside, and we'll just map those to 2 engines each. Now, in the sim, in Microsoft Flight Simulator, it can only manage 4 engines at a time, so it makes sense to map each lever to 2 engines. Now, I'm suggesting that you keep the 2 left levers for the 4 left engines, and the 2 right levers for the 4 right engines. And the main reason for this, and I played a lot with these mappings for this airplane, the main reason for this is that you can use differential engines to steer. When you're sitting idle in the water and you start up your left engines, you're going to see this. When I start the left engines, we're going to start yawing to the right. Those left engines are propelling the plane, but the plane has some drag. And then we finally start the right engines, and it finally levels up. And it does, you know, it's good to be able to steer in slow taxi, even in fast taxi on the step. It's easier to steer. Certainly the rudder will work at fast taxi, but at the slower taxis and normal taxis, you could use differential engines. So do that, and you'll see the difference. And go play with that and do some experimentation. All right, you can see what my bindings are. You can pause the screen if you want to mimic on yours too. Now, the Spruce Goose performance at cruise speed, now 235 miles per hour. If it's endurance cruise, it's obviously lower than that. All right, so 235 is probably the max cruise. There's some other stats that I want to show you here when we take a look at it, but again, they never got to that speed. They did get to a cruise above the water and then put it back down again. The range, 3,000 miles roughly. You'll hear people say, no, it was 2,100, no, it was 2,800, no, it was... You're going to hear all kinds of... Now, this is going to depend on a number of factors, of course. Same with the speeds, they'll vary a bit. Density, altitude, weight of the plane, the condition of the engines. There's lots of variables, of course, in flying. But we're giving an idea of what this thing should perform, all right? Now, the 4 inner propellers had reverse pitch capability. All right, from this diagram here, well, I've sort of made it into a poster painting, but in this diagram here, the four that are closest to the fuselage had reverse pitch capability. So it could, when it's sitting in the water like this, maybe it's drifting, maybe it's going too far ahead, and you want to bring it back for the run, you can actually reverse pitch those 4 engines, and that's enough power to bring it back slowly. Pretty cool. Each propeller was 5.2 meters in diameter. 4 blade propellers on these things. Wow. We're talking about the engine too. So the engine is a Pratt & Whitney, the dependable Pratt & Whitney. This is the most powerful engine, sorry, I should say, the most powerful piston engine Pratt & Whitney ever made before they moved into turboprops. All right. And so in here, it is actually a pressure carburetor distributed fuel, but it's not a turbo. And so this was their most powerful. Now, how did they make it more powerful? They actually did more and more rows. Now, recently I did the YouTube video coverage of the DC-3. The DC-3 had a Pratt & Whitney. Now, that airplane also had the Wright Cyclone without the cowl flaps. But apart from that, I tested the Pratt & Whitney version of it, right? That Pratt & Whitney engine in the DC-3 was 2 rows of 7 cylinders sandwiched together, and that's what turns the propeller. So 2 rows of 7, that was 14 cylinders. Now here we've got 28 cylinders. We're actually taking one engine from a DC-3 and putting another engine behind it of another 14 cylinders, sandwich those together. This is the most powerful thing that they made. And you can see by the diagonals on the actual exhibit here, the diagonals here show you that each layer of 7 cylinders was canted a little more to let the air at it. If they were perfectly aligned all the way along, the air would not get at the back cylinders. So they had to keep turning them a little more, turning them a little more in each row, 4 rows, turning them. And so it was nicknamed the corn cob by the time they saw it. It just looked like a corn cob with all the knobs. All right, that's pretty cool. So 3,000 horsepower, sipped 100 gallons of fuel per hour. That was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek from me here. It sipped 100 gallons of fuel per hour. Man, at today's fuel prices, this plane would not be profitable. 448 spark plugs for all 8 engines. And you know, the reason for this, I'm sort of working backwards on my list here, but the reason for this, everybody, is as we know in aviation, a lot or all these piston engines had 2 spark plugs, unlike our cars at home. But aviation engines have 2 spark plugs, 2 magnetos, 2 separate wires, 2 separate circuits for redundancy in case one fails. And during our run-up, we always test one spark plug on the cylinder, then the other spark plug on the cylinder. Now, we're doing this to all cylinders at the same time, but the point is that we have 2 spark plugs per cylinder. If we've got 28 cylinders, we can do the math. 56 plugs per engine. And it took a technician a half a day to change out the spark plugs on one engine. And now there's 8 engines. There's a lot of maintenance here. There's a lot of stuff here. No wonder it costs so much for them to do this. 448 spark plugs altogether. Now, you know, all their taxi runs and their one flight, I'm sure they never changed the spark plugs. You know, in your car today, I mean, this is back in 47, right? Today in your car, you don't have to change your spark plugs for 150,000 kilometers, I guess 100,000 miles, right? That's typical. I do on my own car maintenance. So, you know, spark plugs are so resilient now, and they're so, the fuel is so measured and so filtered, and so, you know, so spark plugs really last a long time now. So I'm guessing they never did change these out, but putting in, you know, initially installing all these things into all 8 engines. Pretty wild stuff. 189-gallon oil reservoir. Now, there are separate 31-gallon reservoirs for each engine in the engine nacelles. And so this 189-gallon oil reservoir had automatic float switches to replenish all 8 reservoirs behind the engine. It's pretty amazing stuff. I didn't know all of this until I started reading the manual that I bought to go with it. And you get to know some of the details about all of this. Pretty amazing stuff. Now here's just I did this cross-examination. I took the same picture from a museum, and I did a cross-examination just to give you the grids here. There's 7 cylinders right there on the right. There's 7 more right there for 14, 7 more, and 7 more. All right, and as you can see by the angles here and by the heads of them, they're all moved a little more so that air from the propeller over here, air from the propeller will flow to all of them. Now, even with this configuration, they found that the back 7 were hotter than the front 7, which makes sense. All right, a lot of this heated air still comes back and hits those coils at the back. All right, those cylinders and all their fins at the back. So the back ones, I guess they realized they can't go more than 4 deep because that cooling wasn't working so well by the time you got all the way back to the back. Pretty interesting how they did this. They just kept sandwiching layers of 7 together. Pretty wild. All right, weight and balance in the simulator. Let's move on with that. Now you can see in here, what is this? This one has 50% fuel behind me there. Okay, so up here we see it has 50%. We probably can't show that because there's so many engines. Yeah, it doesn't show up on the list here, but so the idea of looking at the weight and balance here in the Microsoft Flight Simulator tool, weight and balance is easier than, of course, in real life. We have to go through lots of calculations and figure out weights of people and baggage and where we placed everything inside the plane. And we go through all this with every flight. Every one of us as pilots do this all the time. Here in Flight Simulator, they give us this nice, easy, quick look. You could change any of those numbers, but you'll see this change down here, and you'll also see center of gravity change, and you'll see a red warning if you're out of center of gravity. In other words, for a lot of you who do fly already and flown other planes, you know that if the center of gravity is more forward, you'll have a more nose down. How are you going to take off like that? It's going to be harder and harder to get to that rotate. That's just basically, there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to center gravity, but same with center gravity if it's back further or even shifted after takeoff, which happens in some disasters. Cargo has shifted because it wasn't tied down properly. They became tail heavy, and as they took off, they just stalled because they couldn't get back to level. They just kept, in this configuration, too much weight back here, and all of a sudden they just fell out of the sky. So this is such an important thing in airplanes. Now, of course, if we're not taking cargo and we don't have to tie it down, you notice that when you put your baggage in, they'll distribute it where it's supposed to go. The plane is designed to handle this. Now, that kind of cargo, a couple of 30-ton Sherman tanks can go in here. You bet that they're going to balance that in the cargo hold so that it's proper CG. All right. So anyway, that's We won't get into more details here, but this is a nice visual of how it looks. And you can play with this and try different flight characteristics, which we do with other planes if you want. So here, this configuration has full fuel load. That's what it says behind me there, full fuel load, and it's nearing the maximum CG limits. And I've got 400,000 maximum takeoff weight is 400,000, which is over. It's supposed to be 400,000 even. I'm 400,139 over. So it's like, ooh, just about. And I think if I added one more thing, if I even did this slider on the payload just a little more, all of a sudden a big red bar shows up. It's like, yeah, I'm at the max. So a lot of the parameters I'm going to give you today are at the max. In other words, we're doing takeoff speeds and we're doing stall speeds, and all of those things are with maximum payload, as if we were heading across the Atlantic with a bunch of troops or a bunch of supplies. All right, so here are the 7 steps. If you guys have been following my video series of a lot of the planes that I've been posting recently or in this last couple of years, learning a new airplane, I go through what I call the 7 steps, the things that I've done to learn a new airplane in real life. The very first thing and the most important thing is obtain the pilot's operating handbook. This is, as I used to say, the Bible, and then some people said, don't use that term. But to me, that means the core. That means the core of what you're going to use as a standard. You're going to use this pilot's operating handbook to find all your answers. Instructors expect you to memorize this thing. I'm serious. So at first you can't memorize this thing. I mean, this manual here was like 150 pages with charts galore and all kinds of details and all kinds of checklists. And it's like, I am not memorizing this thing. But I went in and found the most important stuff first. Later on, I read some more things. Eventually, I wanted to read the background on the oil system of the airplane. And I did that. Then I wanted to read more about the electrical system, 120 volts DC. Why did they go with that? So that's what I want you to think about too, is learn the important stuff first, which I'm showing you in this presentation, and go with that. We're not going to cover every switch in this thing. We're not going to cover every, let's go look at the engineer's panel for the next hour. We're not going to do all of that. We'll do glancing at things, and then we want to fly. All right. And we'll get you confident to fly this thing with the proper speeds. Then you can learn more about it as we go along and see how much the sim will do for us. So the pilot's operating handbook is important. This plane does not come with a manual. I checked in the folder where it's installed. Normally there's a documentation folder. There isn't for this one. All right. So I had to go find one, and the only one I could find was the paid manual, which was the original manual. So that's what we'll do. If you wanted to find this too, I've got a sheet coming up in a minute here that talks about this. The second step, as you've seen in previous videos, is to learn the vital speeds. What's my takeoff speed? What's my cruise speed? What are my settings for those things? Because we have MP and RPM. Landing speed. What about with flaps up and flaps down for different configurations, right? So these are the things, 5 main things we need to learn. There's a million other settings. Well, there's not a million, but there's tons of other speeds in various configurations and various conditions. But let's not get confused and intimidated. Let's just work with the 5 major phases of flight, if you want to talk about that. All right. Now, once we learn that, now learn how to handle multiple engines. Well, I'd say this is the granddaddy of multiple engines, isn't it? 8 engines. And these are the old engines with MP, with manifold pressure and mixture levers for every single engine and propeller levers for every single engine. So we've got this combination of levers now that we need to understand. All right. And it's not that hard, you guys. I mean, if you understand it for one engine, like say you took the Bonanza up and you set certain MP, certain RPM, certain mixture for cruise. All right, let's do that here 8 times. And the levers will do it for all 8. So that's not so bad. So don't feel like you're going to get intimidated by this. Learn how to handle them properly. Every pilot has to learn that. Get or make a checklist. We're going to use checklists that come with it. And we're going to go see what we can do. Now, can you find these on the internet? Well, let's go find out, right? Number 5. Now, this should really go back with number 3, really. And when I look at this procedure here, once we have the checklist, it'll help us. But certainly, learning about the blue knob propeller lever, again, speaks to engines, right? How to use this. The propeller lever seems to control RPM. All right. So and the throttle seems to control MP. So there's a reason for that. We did a whole Tuesday evening on Twitch learning to what the 3 levers do. The throttle lever, the black lever, the propeller lever, the blue lever, and the red lever for mixture, and what they really do to an engine. So we went through those details. We don't do that every session here. Every time you learn a new airplane, I'm not going to go through that whole 2-hour session on learning to handle those levers properly. But look in the POH and it tells you settings. I'm going to give you a few of those right now. So that's one that's really important. Cockpit orientation, now we've been doing some of that by looking at engine gauges and levers, but now we're going to go and look at where's everything else. And this is going to blow you away. I think it will blow you away because you're going to look at the engineer's station. Now, as I mentioned, there's a crew of 4 here minimum. There's actually a crew of 6 or 8 because there are other people in the wings doing maintenance on engines if they need it. There's other people holding lines, mooring lines when they dock and undock, in the back of the plane, in the side of the plane, the front of the nose of the plane. So there's other crew along here. But one of the most impressive members of this team is the engineer, the person who sits there in front of a NASA control center, what it looks like. All 8 engines, dials for everything. And the whole electrical system, the whole oil system, the whole APU system, like all of these different systems. And another engineer to do all the radio electronics that they sit back to back on both stations. So it's like, wow. So cockpit orientation for this plane is pretty elaborate because there's a lot inside this big plane. All right, so we're going to go and look at that and show you what the different views are. Number 7, of course, the pinnacle of it all is like, let's go fly the thing now that we know a bit about it. And that's really what it's about, you guys. If you're impatient, you don't want to hear all this stuff from that I'm going to talk about, jump straight to that part of this video and just go fly the thing. And eventually come back and start learning some of these more details. And certainly that's the way to do it. So the Pilot's Operating Handbook, I purchased it through Amazon. I found it there. I'm sure you can find it other places. This is the one that's been authorized and published. It was originally published by the War Department, reprinted by Periscope Film LLC. So I'm not sure if there's a tie into that to the movie, but I'm certainly using it as my POH. And in here is original pages, you guys. And when I see this, there's the back cover of the book too. There's the back cover with a couple of real photographs there. There's the actual Goose flying in historic flight. And here's Howard Hughes looking back from the cockpit in the plane. And if you'll notice this photograph, you'll notice that looks exactly like it does in the sim. So that's pretty cool. They've actually, made sure that they did that properly. Let me just come back for a second here and just talk about the manual itself. So this manual is a soft cover manual that you buy and get shipped to you. There's no digital version that I could get for Kindle or whatever. And in here, certainly everything I've ever needed to know, from breakout diagrams. I should show you better pictures than this, but I can't copy this book, you guys. I can't take pictures out of this book. So all kinds of breakout pictures, all kinds of description pictures, all kinds of cockpit layouts, so I'm not going to be showing you all of this because it would be copyright to copy from the book. But I've got earmarks on about 8 pages of major things that I need in here. So that's something that's important. You should always get a manual of some sort, and a lot of these sim planes do come with a manual that the manufacturer of the model in the sim have found for us, or we go on the internet and look for the real POHs, which is what I like to do. So that's the first step. Once you've got that, you can comb through all the stuff like I've done. I'm giving you a synopsis here, a summary of things that I have found. This picture you see here, this blue picture here, is actually the walkway picture. That blue part in the middle is the walkway on top of the plane. And there is actually, I remember a video, they had movie cameras back then, and they had a video of Howard Hughes inspecting the plane from the wing, walking along the top of the wing. Same with the back, they've got a walking area. So the skills we have to master as we work with this are in front of us right now. So I'll just get out of the way here just so you can see what's in there. So, these are the main things we have to do. Cockpit orientation, mapping controls, as I mentioned, takeoff and landing. These are important stuff. I mean, once you're in the air, you can play around with dials and levers and figure it out. But the takeoff and landing, it's not one of those figure it out. It's like, boom, you don't want to hit the water. You don't want to take off too soon and stall. Cruise settings while we're up there, and then the management of those engines as we go along. Can't have them overheat. What's this cowl flaps thing? How do we cool them if they're getting too hot? And, all of that stuff, right? So that's the idea behind it. Let's go take a look at the most realistic setup here. Here you see the cockpit in the Spruce Goose, and you can see there's the main throttle levers there. This is a friction lever over here. and a lot of other things are right here nearby. Of course, like any pilot setup, the main instruments. We're going to take a look at each of these in closer detail. In the interesting part, you guys, now I'm saying here, you know, yoke in your left hand, throttle in your right. You never know, with some planes are different. When we were looking at the Osprey, it was stick in the right hand and throttles in your left. You know, things like that. Fighter pilot planes have the, you know, that same thing too. So, you know, it's just really, this is your conventional yoke in the left hand kind of thing. Now, the idea about, you know, this steering wheel, I'm going to call it a steering wheel because it looks like an old, what, Studebaker steering wheel. Back in 1947, when they were deciding on, every single detail on this plane was decided by Howard Hughes. It was very eccentric. And if you saw the movie, apparently it's very realistic on how he acted and how he was. And I remember them lining up in the movie, they lined up something like 10 different yoke wheels. And they said, pick one. He didn't like any of them. You know, I was like, he would try each one and have a feel for it. And he was that detailed. I mean, does it really matter? You know, the different yokes we've seen over the years, does it really matter? You can get used to whatever yoke's in front of you in an airplane, but it had to be whatever he figured. So this was interesting that they ended up with this very basic looking yoke. I mean, I guess it's not a full wheel, which some of them were back then. You never have to hand these things, as many of you know. But anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that. But the point is that it's very interesting. That's the one he ended up with after all those designs he had in front of him. I just like sometimes wonder about that. All right, so now you see here, step number 2. Let's get on with it, right? Up here is the airspeed indicator, everybody. And what I do is I like to depict the speeds that you should be following. All right, stall speeds are important. I've elaborated those into 3 different areas from the performance charts. And these numbers come from the performance charts, even though in the sim I found some of these numbers were different. All right, and so maybe because it's knots, not miles per hour, maybe the outer one is supposed to be knots. I look at this closely and I'm starting to doubt it after a few test runs. And so we're going to still go, you know, use the manual and use this as our guide. This is the way it was originally intended to do. Now, the interesting part is I've got 2 columns here, gross weight 350, which is what they were doing for testing, and then 400,000, which would be full. All right, now here with this one, I'm going to just focus mainly on 1 column. And with this one, as you notice, the stall speed without flaps, the stall speed, 86 miles per hour. 86 miles per hour. Below 86, you're going to fall out of the sky. The wing cannot produce enough lift for the weight, all right? And the whole idea here, as you add more flaps, you also add more lift. You do add more drag. So you're going to be slower, and it's now 80. You've got a stall speed that's lower because now you can go even slower without falling out of the sky. That's your normal takeoff. And in your, I should have put in here, your landing speed is with 45 flaps. So you've got a lower speed to land, which is great. The slower and the more gentle you can hit that water, the easier it is to land. 73 miles per hour to land. All right, so that's good, you know, and I've got that down here, landing. Now, 73 is stall, landing is 81. Now, a lot of times you'll look at these numbers and say, why are they different? Stall speed is where you fall out of the sky, and you want to be 1.3 above, or in the manual here it says 10% above stall. So, you know, you look at those numbers and just see what they are. So landing, we're aiming for 81. Higher than that, well, we're hitting the water, if probably harder, certainly faster. And it gets harder on the equipment. Of course, there's no suspension in water. This is a big, lumbering, heavy airplane. And when it hits the water, it displaces a lot. All right, VNE is the never exceed 240 miles per hour. Although it does say it can cruise at 248, that's only for something like 1 minute. You know, you can do maximum power to take off for 1 minute. All right. And then you can see in here, maximum cruise 190, normal cruise 141. These are cruise settings to keep the engines cool and to keep things rolling, all right? And as you load it to the max, you'll see that the speeds really drop on everything, on most things. So to make this something you can use, I've highlighted a few things here. First of all, rotate. So 92, as you roll down the water, there's no runway here. As you roll down the water, the water runway, we're looking for 92 before we start to pull back, a bit of pressure on the yoke. This plane cannot jump into the air, all right? And no float plane can jump into the air like that. So, you know, you do a gentle back, you're offering a different angle of attack, and the lift overtakes weight, and finally you come off the water. This thing is a big, lumbering monster. So 92 miles per hour, we're going to offer the wings. That's when we put pressure on to rotate. All right. And so, and then we want to aim for VY, best rate of climb. So as we rotate, we'll pick up more speed, and we reach 112. That's the angle we want to keep. And from that point, you can start working with MP and RPM to figure out 112 climb. And that's the normal climb. All right. Best angle is when you have to, I've got a shorter lake I'm coming on. I mean, would they put this thing into a lake, a small lake? But, best angle is typically in most POHs over a 50-foot obstacle at the end of the runway, like trees, like bush pilots would know. And you can see there it's a slower speed because you're at a higher angle. Just think of best angle is the highest angle you should go before you'll stall. All right. So best angle obviously is a slower speed as you're climbing, but it lets you get the most amount of height over time, right? As you do in basic flight training, right? So that we'll use if we have to. Here with this one, we've got an open ocean in front of us. Or as a couple of my demos show, I got an island or a peninsula in my way, probably because when I started the engines, the plane started to yaw, and now I'm facing an island, when I had open water ahead of me. So these things can happen, and so you just have to know these numbers. And all instructors for all conventional planes, when you're learning to fly, expect you to memorize stall speeds, VR, VY, and VX. Right? Those four things. Now, of course, the fifth one, as I mentioned before, is your cruise settings. What's cruise? What are my normal cruise? Most people think pedal to the metal. I got the nickname, I've got the handle Firewall forwarder, because I was always in our group flies forgetting to do my cruise check. And in a cruise check, you pull back the throttle, you pull back your MP, you pull back after 3,000 feet, higher than 3,000 feet, you pull back your mixture. So I was forgetting to do that, and I look behind me, and people are miles behind me. It's like, whoo, and they started calling me Firewall forwarder. So here, you can't leave your engines full. And when you level off the plane, yeah, you'll get lots of speed when you level off, but you can't leave the engines at full. They will overheat, they will have damage, they will have troubles, and you don't want engine failures. Now, the manual does have a whole section on engine failures or all emergencies, like all POHs do. I'm not covering emergencies today. All right, it would make another hour, right? But I'm just covering the basic stuff so we get to understand it. So normal cruise 141. Okay, so there I see I'm taking off, rotate, 112, 141 in cruise, 81 to land. All right, if you want to just do those four, and then always keep in mind what your stall speeds are. You see what I mean? So I've just given you the basics. I'm not giving you all those pages of performance charts that you've got to follow the curves and figure everything out. This is what we'll work with, all right? And I'll make reference to that as we take off and land, as we go. Now, the important part is for each of these areas. Now, this probably comes out of, I'm not sure even where I found this. Oh, I know where this is. This was on a checklist that I found on flightsim.to. They give us a checklist. And in there was a small chart in the upper corner. And I'll give you credit for that one, for that person when we get to that checklist item. All right. But here you can see the whole point is, what should MP be on taxi and warm up? So taxi and warm up is what they did mostly with the Spruce Goose and what they were only supposed to do at that stage of the Spruce Goose, taxi and warm up. And you can see in here, they have a propeller lever, and they're saying low, high, low. But the RPMs now, we're controlling them with our propeller levers. So keep in mind that we only control these two things. We don't control this at all. We can't have, in the sim, we can't do anything with that. So we're just going to set MP to 10, which is very low. Manifold pressure, very low. You can see up here at max takeoff for 5 minutes, 50. We're almost 50 here. 50 on the MP. We're only at 10 for warm-up and taxi. Step taxi is where you're up on the step. In any flying boat, any pontoon or float airplane, you'll see there's a bigger chunk at the front and a smaller section at the back. That's where the step is. It's like a stairs that you step on. All right, it's actually a big change in the shape of that float. And when you're doing a step taxi, it's a faster taxi. There's less displacement on the water. You are planing across the water. There's actually less wake and faster speeds. And so step taxi, we want MP of 13. We don't want to take off. We don't want to leave the water. So we're going to keep it at 13 and let the RPM climb to 1600. The engines are slow to climb and slow to recede. So we're going to see approximately 1600. I think when my tests, I got to 1500. But I set this bang on 13. and then watch this come up close to 16. All right, takeoff for 5 minutes is full levers, everything's full. All right, so 49.5 and 25.50, we'll make sure we got those set for takeoff. And again, our speed, our rotate speed, our normal climb speeds, we just figure all those out. METO, and a lot of people asked me what that was. I had to go back and read it again. I forgot. I knew it was maximum engine takeoff. No, here it's maximum except takeoff. Maximum except takeoff. I mean, this is in the chart and this is on POH, and you just go, what's METO again? And so this is except takeoff. So takeoff is 49.5. They're saying maximum you should ever put it other than takeoff is 44.3. All right, I'll show you this on the gauges. I mean, the gauges are here in the background for a reason, so you can relate to them as I talk about them. So METO at 44.3, well, let's look at this. 49.5, 44.3. 49.5 right here. Even though there's green after 50, I never made it there. It's very hard on the engine. But 44.3 right here. All right, and what you're seeing here is something less, probably in cruise. Let's see, around 40. Well, 34 here is max cruise. 34 would be back here, you guys. Now, the interesting thing is in the sim, it's got the green arc here. Typically, you keep your needles in the green. All right, here's your 35, here's your 36. So I've actually done a lot of cruises right here on this little tick mark right here, because it is in the green, engines were operating properly. So even though the manual of the original manual says 34 and 2230, this is where these numbers come from. The 34 is back here. There's 30, there's 35, 34 is just before it, and it's in the white area. So, you know, they're saying 34 is max cruise, yet there's all this green area to work with. So don't be confused by that. You can certainly use these areas to work with. I like looking in the real manual of the real plane, and that's what's happening here. All right, but as you can see, this cruise setting is obviously going to use less fuel and get you there. All right, and that's the idea behind it. All right, learning a new airplane, how to handle multiple engines. Yeah, look at this. Now there's the 4 levers that control all 8 engines, the friction lever right there. Here's propeller pitch, low, high, etc. with this switch. These are indicators. And here is the engineer station looking at all the engines. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the left, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the right, and every gauge you can think of. Now, I'm not going in real close here, but you can look in close as you want. Oil pressures are in there. Oil temperatures are in there. A typical thing we do on a downwind check, or a typical thing we do on a cruise check, is we go across and look at mags, masters, switches, circuit breakers, temperature and pressures in the green. And that's what we're seeing here. All right. And then everything is here. And every gauge you can think of, the engineer sitting in front of them. And there is a transfer in this plane from pilot to engineer, or engineer back to pilot. For instance, as the pilot's coming in for a landing, the pilot wants control. The pilot wants to control those settings with levers, and so the pilot is in control. During cruise, the pilot can just change it back over to engineer. Engineer is monitoring all of these things and changing things as needed per engine. So the engineer is quite busy in this plane, sitting back further from the pilot and the co-pilot. And we'll see that when we go into cockpit orientation. I couldn't help but put all 8 engines in this picture down below. I mean, that is unbelievable. How, you know, there's tiny little people up here in the cockpit in the top. Wow. It's amazing, you guys. I actually have a plastic model of this that I built many years ago. And it's not that hard to, an 8-year-old could do it. I've built some elaborate plastic models over the years of airplanes. This was an easy one. And the only intricate part was putting the propeller onto the nacelles, to the cowl flaps, to the engine. And the rest of it's all snapped together and we're done. And it's already painted this color. It's already that color of plastic. So it's like, that was easy. And you too can do the same. All right, so take a look at this. Here's a closer view. I was saying there's oil temperature, there's oil pressure. Oil pressure, low light comes on, the engineer knows right away for any one of them. Oil cooling flaps. Oil cooling flaps. What? And then coolant temperature. Coolant, where's their coolant? You know, and then fuel pressure low. So, you know, this is all these things that they have to look at. There's more gauges down here, and there's actually a flat panel there too, where they have some more switches. So it's amazing. And we'll do some cockpit orientation in a minute. We'll go look at these things. I think this one's carburetor air maybe, or what is it? Pneumatic pumps on number 1 and 2. Yeah, that's your air. That's your air pressures. Okay, so we'll go look and see those in flight, see what they look like. All right, so get or make a checklist. This one in Twitch channel where we first unveiled this presentation and did a workshop where we flew together. And I'm going to show that at the end of this video. If you want, pause it here, go to the end, see a bunch of Spruce Gooses in the air. It's amazing. And then come back here. So, you know, in here, in Twitch, and again, as I mentioned in previous videos, if you go to my Twitch channel, ForderLearnToFly, and you just go into the chat area, even if I'm not streaming at the time, chat still works. And type in this shortcut, ! checklist, you can have this checklist too. Now this actually comes from flightsim.to, from James Maxwell. I want to give him credit because this was all I had to go on before I bought the manual. And the manual came in, this manual came in the day after I did this presentation on Twitch, and then I changed my numbers. So you're seeing the up-to-date numbers here, the up-to-date presentation from the manual, which took me a few days to extrapolate the stuff that I needed. All right, so I really like this because this is all I had to go on when I was first doing the presentation of the Hughes flying boat. And this is great. And there's that chart that I showed you earlier. James put that in also. So you guys, I would say, instead of going to checklist and downloading it, visit flightsim.to, go find this checklist from James Maxwell, and buy him a coffee, you guys. People who take the time to do these things, donate something, throw $1 his way. And if 100 people do it, this might have been worth it. If 1,000 people do it, wow, you know. For some of the things you see on flightsim.to, I have actually donated $10 for that person to say, nice work, thanks a bunch. And if more people gave them $1 or $2, then that would be great. All right. And then you can also make your own from the POH, but there's a lot of work there. I would say I've done 3 days work combing through this thing, and I still keep it with me everywhere I go. If I'm standing in line somewhere, I'm looking at something else. I'm studying this thing. This is what I do. So there's a lot of work to do that. I would say go get this. That's easier. All right, so learning a new airplane step by step. The next step, we're working with this panel here from the engineers, right? Learn about the blue knob propeller lever. Yeah, here we go. The blue knob. So you can see in here the engineer controls for selecting high or low RPM. All right, here it says high, here it says low. So there's a simple switch, high, low RPM. And that's what we're talking about. And you're looking up here to see what it looks like from here. They got other switches in here. You look closely and see what they're for. But the whole idea in here, back in the mid-40s, there were no color coding for the levers, the propeller levers for all 8 engines. And you can see they're not animated in the sim, but your propeller levers in your home cockpit can still control them. And that's what you can do. And like conventional, if you've flown the Bonanza and you're used to working with MP, I'm using that as it's the stock airplane in the flight simulator. Then if you're used to using propeller lever and MP lever for throttle, okay, you'll be fine here. So the blue knob, now in here I mentioned about the RPM here. That's what the blue knob controls. When it's at low MP, the RPM lever is full forward. When you take off and land, you leave the blue lever or the RPM lever or the propeller lever. They're typically the same thing. And this is the confusion about this lever, because a lot of people go, no, it's for your propellers. No, it's controlling my RPM. I tried it. It's doing both. Controlling the RPM and the propeller pitch is what it's doing. All right. And in previous videos, I've shown this where you can actually see the blades of the propeller turn. They bite more air or they bite less air. All right. And that's really that's the main reason for that. Now it does have what's called a governor right up there by the propeller blades, oil driven typically with a centrifugal weights on it. This governor, as you bite more air, you need more torque, you need more RPM, you need more something, and it knows, the engineers know what it needs. And it changes the RPM according to the pitch. All right? So the whole point is you and I only have to know, where should I put this lever when I land, when I'm coming into land? Where should I put this lever on takeoff, and where should it be in cruise? And here's the simple bottom line, everybody. For takeoff and landing, full forward, right to the firewall. For cruise, something back from the firewall. That's it. Think about that. You adjust this during cruise. All right. That RPM is going to change according to MP. MP is going to affect the RPM. But our lever is mainly for when we're in cruise. When we're in cruise, we are 34 or 43 or whatever we're doing at the time. Look at this. It wants it to stay at 2550. We have to adjust the lever to give you these numbers. All right. It could be too far forward, too much RPM, And that's not good for the engine either. We got to think about cooling, got to think about the speed, the torque, and everything else. Let's follow the manufacturer's numbers. All right, so full forward for takeoff and landing. One of the reasons it's there for landing is because you want to be able to do a go around without messing around with levers. In a go around, it's full throttle and all the other levers are already in place. You're on full mixture rich and you're on full propeller forward. So red knobs, blue knobs, all forward, and your throttle as you're coming into land, and full throttle if you need to go around. That's why it's there. All right, so it's pretty simple. Blue lever all the way in for landing, blue lever still all the way in for takeoff. We'll certainly adjust flaps for those conditions. All right, cockpit orientation. We'll go into this and then we'll go to demonstrations and start flying this baby. I've taken so many pictures here, I just couldn't decide which ones to show you during the presentation, but here's one of them. Now, this is actually a nice picture. Apart from the view outside, which is gorgeous, this is British Columbia, you guys, one of the lakes. I think this is Harrison Springs. But what I've got here, you can see that there's the main panel in front of the cockpit. There's the center console, which shows manifold pressure and RPM. This is important, and either pilot can read those in the middle, but there's so much space. Even though this cockpit is the smallest width of this plane, look how much space they still had, right? It's just amazing. And of course, both of them have access to other things like intercoms, radios, and other things. You can see that there's 4 levers, friction knob, and pitch switch over here for the co-pilot. Same levers are over here, and then we'll go learn. There's also a flap lever right here. There's a flap lever for both pilots. There's lots of things here in the middle that they can just turn and do things from that middle console and turn back and then see their view. So I wanted to show you this. There's some fire control overhead stuff here too. So, and these are just lights pointing down in the cockpit for night flight. So let's go take a look at closer view now. Cockpit orientation. Let me just do a quick view looking down at the console. Pilot seat here on the left, normal rudders there. Navigation gauges at the bottom. There's even a gauge missing in the sim. I guess in real life when they took pictures, it was missing. The trim indicators over here in the far left. The 6-pack here. Now I'll go into a more detailed view of this just so we can get comfortable with that. The engine information in the middle, of course. Hydraulics are right here. And then there's some other levers over here. Switches here, flaps here, radio stuff here, autopilot here. So, you know, everything at their fingertips. Typical, keep your hand on the yoke on the left hand, and your right hand does all the other things, like any other plane, even a Cessna 172 is like that. All right, unless you're in the right seat, of course, unless you're an instructor. Okay, so use your control key plus your number keys for different views. Look at this view here. We're going to go in closer, you guys. Look at this view here. This is the engineer's view. You imagine that? And the engineer sitting sideways to the engine movement. To the plane movement. He's sitting sideways. So is the radio operator behind him. They're both sitting sideways. That's got to feel kind of weird, right? Especially when they're like descending. And it's like they feel like they're falling over. When they're climbing, they feel like they're going backwards. So it's kind of interesting, you know, how this is all set up and how it works. But these are all the different views, you guys. And we'll go take a look at a few of those. Let's start out with the 6-pack in front of them. Normal altitude, radio direction indicator, and ADF. There's a typical ADF needle right there. Radio magnetic indicator. Okay, what do we need to do with these things? As we get into more advanced, more than this video I'm showing you now, you can start playing more with navigation. We're just going to use it for basic navigation today. Trims are over here, which is really handy how they show trims. I can see now that I have full flaps on this picture right now. I've got neutral aileron, which is typical unless there's an engine failure. And I've got elevator just below neutral. All right, probably for takeoff. No, if I got full flaps, I probably just landed. All right, so this is probably, or it could be in cruise, but let me have a look here. No, airspeed's at 0. I've landed. I'm already just sitting around in the water. All right, and this is probably the trim when I came into land. Just by looking at the screen, you can tell my altitude's at sea level and normal stuff there. All right, moving over now. Up top, we see, you know, all of the fuel compartments and all the switches for them, fuel and fire warnings, and your normal light switches on all the different areas. Look, right float, right wing, dome light, position light, anchor light, pitot heat, left float, you know, so, and then here you see dim, medium, and bright depending on the time of day, right? External doors button. Now, a lot of this stuff is in-op, doesn't actually work, but you can go click around and see which ones will work. Flares, wow. We got flares. But anyway, it's there modeled, but I don't know how many of these are actually working. I haven't clicked them all yet. The radio operator behind the pilot, there's a telegraph keyer right there for sending out messages. Yep, back in the 40s, Morse code was very common. It still happens today, you guys. For those who don't know, Morse code happens on our VORs and our ILSs. We have to tune in the frequency. We have to visually see. A lot of our G1000 or glass cockpits have the actual letters show up, but we also turn up the nav radio and select the proper nav radio, and we listen for the Morse code and make sure it says what it says. So we're listening still for a broadcasted Morse code, right? Speaking of Morse code, and I'll leave it behind, it's old technology. It was how we used to communicate before we could speak voices, but it's still used today, you guys. Here it is in the Spruce Goose, but as you heard, the VORs, the ILSs, get this. Listen next time a train is going by. I'm serious, you guys. I mean, listen next time a train is going by. You might hear a long, a short, and a long. I'll just give you that little tidbit there. That's the letter Q in Morse code. Why do trains broadcast the letter Q as they're heading toward a station? All the, the bars are coming down, the lights are flashing, the train's doing two longs, a short, and a long. What's that all about? And it has something to do with back in the day when the royal train, the Queen, which starts with Q. Why are they still doing it today? So you see, it's not all about aviation. Yeah, I thought I'd give you that tidbit. Okay, on with the next screen. So here the engineer sits here with all of this in front of them, the engineer's station. And they have to memorize this stuff. They probably had a hand in designing this stuff. They know it well. And they're managing it all. You imagine putting all of this in front of the pilot and saying, just fly the plane. But there's a million buttons. So this is something that it took, as you heard, a crew of minimum 4. And then extra crew to manage lines and maintenance of the engines and check other things. But, this is the main engineer looking at this stuff. All right. Pretty amazing stuff. But wait, there's more, and we look up here and we see all this stuff they got to look at here. Wow. Cowl flaps, cowl temperature, fuel flow, fuel pressure low. These are all your manifold pressure for each engine, your RPM for each engine. Now, your levers, as you push them forward, you'll see all the dials go forward. They start moving forward at the same time if everything's working right. Your RPM will all increase the same time if everything's going right. So, these things, when you see them in action, and they all work here in the sim, you just go, wow. Someone had to sit here and watch all of this magnificent stuff happening, this history in the making, right? Back in the day. Pretty cool stuff. And we get to go fly this, right? Here it is, suspended with bungee cords, just like the compass back in the day. The gauges themselves, to reduce the shake on the gauges is what it is, which can, over time, can hurt the gauges. They are very precise pivoted needles on top of these gauges. And if you can reduce some of the shock that happens inside that airplane, you're probably preserving the life of the gauges. And so you'll see all of these moving in the center console where both the pilot and the co-pilot can see it. And they're just mimicking. They're mimicking, left and right. There's 4. You'll see the numbers on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you'll see that there's 2 per. And, this is the same as the DC-3. The DC-3 had an MP gauge for the pilot that had 2 different needles inside. One said 1 on it, one said 2, because the DC-3 only had 2 engines. All right, here it's got 1 and 2. Over here it's got 3 and 4. You can see the 4 showing. Here it's got 5 and 6. 6 is showing, and 7 and 8. 8 is showing, and 7 is below it. And you'll see that if you play with just the levers one way or the other, you can actually see the needles, move inside there. Now there is a synchronization button or lever inside this plane. It doesn't work for us, but that's what you typically do. Anybody who's flown multi-engine, you want them to be synchronized. Multi-engine propellers, you want them to be synchronized. If you're ever in a plane where they're not synchronized, you'll hear this vibration. It's like a wave coming in and out, in and out, in and out, depending on how far out of sync they are. And it's annoying after a while. So you really want them synchronized so that the frequency made by those propellers isn't bugging your ears. Honestly, you guys, if you ever have been in real planes, you'll see what I mean. All right, that's the idea behind that. The engineer's electrical panel, there's 24 volts DC for a lot of things, like conventional planes of the day. Planes today still using 24 volts DC. And that's simple enough to, even a golf cart uses 24 volts DC. You know, it's simple enough to take a couple of 12 volt batteries in series and you've got yourself 24 volts. So there is a DC emergency backup power supply for this system. There's also 2 APUs behind this panel, 2 actual small 4-cylinder engines, number 1 and number 2, that produce DC power, 120 volts DC, that supply all of this stuff also once things are running. So there's all of that. This is an elaborate electrical design system, very elaborate from back in those days. And the fact that there's actually 2 APUs, 2 actual engines inside the floor behind this thing, inside this, and exhausting outside, of course, right? That's pretty cool. I don't know if I show a picture of that, but now here's a normal flying view like this. You get to see the instruments, you get to see outside, you get to see the horizon. You know, obviously I got mountains in front of me. I'm going to have to turn to do a takeoff, but this is the normal flying view that you would see. Take a look at this baby right here beside me. You notice it's got a crank and it's got dials. I mean, a graduation. This is your trim wheel. That's what that is. It's your trim wheel, and I've got it set right now for just above 0. Pretty wild. You just sit here with your left hand, hold the yoke with your right, and now you do this. And that's how you set the trim. Most of us don't even see this gauge. Most of us, in our GA planes and up, most of us will reach down and move the trim wheel down below the throttle with our hand, not even looking, until we have less pressure on our yoke. That's what it's for. That's what trim is for. Less pressure on the yoke. You're not holding that attitude and holding that forever. You'll get fatigued. So we use trim to trim off the control pressure. Now here in your home cockpit, you have an automatic pressure from springs or bungee cords. What we're trying to do is the same thing. If you find yourself still pulling back from neutral and you're trying to hold that, maybe you're climbing, trim it out and then let the yoke go. Trim it out, let the yoke go. And if you can do it hands-free, now it's trimmed. You can do that in your home cockpit too. All right, we don't have the actual flying surfaces pushing and pulling on that yoke, but we can neutralize the yoke and trim it. All right, so set the attitude, then trim it. And if you can let go and the yoke doesn't move, okay, we're good. Normal flying view. All right, here's how you can do it real simple. I'm going to do this one real simply. I could do the complete elaborate startup according to the checklist that's in the sim. The sim has its own checklist. It's very elaborate. It's very long-winded. It's going to take forever. And when I was doing that, I've done it twice now. When I'm doing that, I'm finding by the time we get to the right side to do those engines, I've yawed 90 degrees. I'm heading to a shoreline. And it's like, how do you do this fast? So this is what they give us, all right? APUs on and off. These are the 2 engines sitting in the back that are, you know, on the same platform as the engineers. And they're little 4-cylinder engines. There's stats for that in the book I'm reading. And they'll do all your generation stuff. But all we're doing here is we're simply hitting auto startup. All right. Now the curtains are for curtains further back. I tried these curtains. They slide back and forth. I was like, okay, what's that for? I thought they were for the pilot. Curtains, you guys. They had curtains. The DC-3 has curtains for all the passengers. So it actually pulls the blinds down or puts the blinds up back further where there's windows. Huh. You know, maybe it got too hot in this great big thing. Maybe there's a big greenhouse effect in this thing. So, okay, that's kind of cool. We're just going to use auto startup and auto shutdown. Why not? All right. And then later, if you feel like it, go through the checklist. Once you're comfortable with the plane, go through the checklist that's built in or in the POH, the real one, and start each engine manually, but one by one. You know? Finally, we'll take it for a spin. Finally, we'll take it for a spin. Spawn at a water runway. Now this is important because it's not amphibious. So you got to find a water runway. So I've been using BC because there's quite a few of them there. Harrison Springs was one of them. Another one that I'm at right now down towards Friday Harbor that I'm at for some of these demos. Give yourself a lot of room to take off and land. Record a flight file if you wish. For the workshop, I had people sending me their file and I would watch it and see how it goes and comment on it, on how they did. But this isn't, you know, you're not expected to submit anything to me. If you'd like to do that, if you want to record a flight file and you're happy with your performance or you're having troubles and you want me to help troubleshoot it, send it to me, hforder@gmail.com. And a lot of students do that. I have quite a few students worldwide that will help, that will send stuff, and I help them with that. And by all means, do that, you guys. So if you can't spawn at a water runway, or you want to spawn at your favorite airport, you'll have to use the Y key, and then you'll have to slew over to the water and plop it down in the water. Okay, that's how you can do it, because it's not amphibious. You can't take off from a runway. There's just too much friction. For the demonstration, gather your checklist, your POH, and let's head to the airplane. Try all the control plus number key views so you get familiar with your views. There's nothing worse than coming in for a landing and you've got the wrong view. You're looking straight at the water when you should be looking at the horizon. It's like, what view do I need here? So get comfortable with your views first, or else you can't fly the plane properly, all right? Ensure throttle and propeller bindings are correct, or else you can't set the proper numbers. Start up with the clipboard, easier way to start up. You'll still see it start up properly. We're going to do that demonstration right now. Cruise out to, in this case, I was at Vancouver Harbor. Cruise out to Vancouver Harbor and land there. Use the clipboard to shut down. And then let's see how many Spruce Gooses we can get in the sky for this trip. Now, this was the demonstration I did on Twitch, and a lot of people joined in. I think we had 6 Spruce Gooses in the sky, and 6 of us landed in the harbor over at Vancouver Harbor in BC. And it was amazing because, you know, in real life, you'll never see more than one. It was 6 of us. It was great. And I'll show you that here in the video too, you guys, as we get going along. All right, let's go demonstrate this. Let's do some stall testing here at altitude. Well, altitude. Where we are right now. Yeah, we're at 3,000 feet. We can do it from here. So I've done my Hazel check. I'm just going to, I'm around 95 to 100 knots. What I'm going to do now is just push full power, full everything, which is your normal takeoff. It's not your METO, it's your takeoff. So I'm all the way up there, 49, 2550. I've got all the power I can grab. And I just want to see this thing. It's obviously going to climb, so let's go back to here. It's going to climb. I want to see the speed drop. I want to see what happens on a power on stall. This is power on, full power. Take it to a climb. Let's see what happens. Really nice climb rate. It's really performing well. We're decaying our airspeed, which is normal. I'm just keeping my head out of the way here as we do this so we can focus on the plane. There, we're getting close to stall speed. Keep it going. I'm pulling back the yoke. I'm halfway back. I'm all the way back. I have no more yoke. And you can see I'm starting to mush down. I can't do anything more with it. That's full power stall at 55. And I'm only at 3,000 feet and I'm at gross weight. All right, and I'm holding the yoke back, and you can see that it's still gaining speed. It dropped its nose naturally and gained speed. I got the yoke all the way back. All right, now I'm going to level off, get some speed again. Level off meaning I'm just going to relax the yoke. Let it pick up some more speed here. A little more. And now what I'm going to do is a power off stall. Power off just means, all right, let's get back to level here. Yeah, oh, we're already at level. Sorry. Let's just pull back all power now. All power is back. And with all power back, you can see the speed is decaying already. I'm just giving it a bit of a nose up attitude. Like that. Don't have to be abrupt. You can force it by going even steeper, but I'm pulling back the yoke to try and maintain altitude. Pulling back the yoke to try and maintain level. Pulling back the yoke. You can see what's happening. Now we're getting close to stall. I'm pulling back. Now I'm all the way back to my chest. I have no more yoke, and then it falls off around the 60 mark. Full power. We don't want to do a dive bomb. Look at that. Full power. Check forward. We might even not have enough room here. And we're like that. Look at that speed. Let's use that speed to our advantage. We didn't do the never exceed, but boy, this thing dropped like a rock. So you can see there, the speed dial does show us a tick mark here, and it shows us a white mark here. Now this was done completely without any flaps at all. So that makes sense. Somewhere around there. Do not go below there. And that's a good thing to do. That's good practice, right? Now let's just try it once more with flaps. Alright, so now this time, let's come down to our flap lever so you can see what's happening. There's our flap lever. I'm going to give it 10, 20. I'm going to give it 30. Just, that would be a normal kind of landing. You could even do 45 in the water, but it's only a water plane. But there's the flaps. You can see the flaps are really down there. Keep this thing level. There we go. Let's do one more like that. There's one more flap. Nice. There's our landing configuration. Let's make sure we got water ahead of us in case we do head down. Alright, so now what we want to do, look at that speed. Okay, I'm going to pick up some more speed here. I have throttles full, so I just have to put the nose down, lose a bit of altitude. Here's a normal view here. Lose a bit of altitude, and then we'll see what happens. Nose down. And it makes sense. When you put full flaps on, you're going to get that nose down attitude. That's what you want when you're landing. Obviously, water landings are more difficult because, until you see the waves or the ripples, nothing but water. We're good. Alright, so there's our configuration. Let's get in a little closer here. Have a good look at that, what that looks like. Now we're going to do a power on and power off stall with full flap. And let's just see, it should be a lower stall speed. This should grant us a lower speed. So we're full power on right now. Oops, let's go here. And let's pull it back. Pulling it back, you can see it's gaining some altitude, of course. You want to do it more gently than that. I pulled back too abruptly. You want to pretty much stay level altitude while you see the speed decay. Should be lower now than 60. We should be able to stay aloft longer at a lower speed. There's the 60, hasn't fallen, the nose hasn't fallen. My yoke is not back to my chest. Pull the yoke back a bit more. I'm trying to maintain altitude. There, I've got full yoke. Full yoke at 45, 50, exactly 50. Still holding, and it's starting to drop now at 45. So 45 now, power on stall. Look at that. I can hold that. It doesn't fall drastically when you got power on. It actually holds that with the yoke full back. It's holding 50. It's actually gaining some speed because it did drop the nose a little. This is a very nice, gentle power on stall with full flap. All right, let's gain some speed again. Check down, pick up more speed. I'm focusing on this most of the time. All right, I can tell whether I'm diving or climbing, of course, but I'm focusing on this. I got lots of altitude. I got nobody around me. All right, let's pick it up to 100 again. You know, 140, 120, 110, somewhere around there is fine. Normal kind of cruise. I think endurance cruise is somewhere around 140 for this thing. Oh, check it down a little more. Come on, pick up some speed. I do have full flaps, so it's awfully hard to get down to 100. I mean, up to 100. All right, we'll start from there. Pull some power back all the way. It'll take a while, but the engines will do that. I am level flight right now. Level flight. As the needle starts to drop, I want to pull the nose up a little. Pull the nose up a little. I'm trying to stay level. I'm really pulling the nose up. The drag of these flaps are really killing me now. All right, let's see what happens. Power off. Stall. I got yoke all the way back. Nose drops drastically at 50. Putting power on. Checking forward. Picking up some speed and pull it back again. And it's recovering. And now I'll pull back power to a normal cruise. As we pull away from our climb here, we're going to pull back our MP, manifold pressure, back to 35. We're also going to pull back our RPM, as you see here, back to 2250. That's what it says in the book. That's what we're setting it for cruise. And then we'll go and take a look at the same thing from the engineer's panel here. We're pulling it back to 35, and we're also pulling back. It wasn't up there. Okay, yeah, we'll pull it back to 2250. Same thing. So, you know, the engineer can see the individual engines here and make adjustments, and we'll show you those levers in a minute on what the engineer can do. Now that we've set it, we'll take a look at our speed, and we'll also just see what our speed is at this specific setting. There's the engineer's panel. Can you imagine sitting in front of that and then monitoring everything from, you know, pressures, temperatures, fuel flow, synchronization of all the engines, etc. Pretty amazing stuff. Now here you see the temperatures and pressures when you look at these, and as you adjust your dials, temperatures typically are slower to rise. I can see here it actually looks like my engines aren't up into the green area yet for the oil temperature, but the point is that that's where the engineer can watch all these things and adjust things accordingly. So here in our straight and level, you know, what speed did we get at our standard setting? That's what we want to look at, and then we want to adjust it to go, I'm going to take a guess at around our supposed cruise speed of 140 miles per hour, and we're just going to see if we can attain that. But first, let's look at the levers. These ones down here for the cowl flaps are inoperative, but here the throttle levers, you can do that with your mouse, or you can do it with your throttle controls in your home cockpit. There's all the left wing engines, here's all the right wing engines. I'm doing that just with my home cockpit mappings. And the other things, most things that you see here, you can't touch or move. The magnetos up here, the magneto switches that are up here, they're certainly live. And you can do them individually. If you go through the checklist that's built into the sim, you can do each individual engine one by one and go through that long, laborious process. For realism, why not, right? You can certainly do that. Now we're in cruise configuration. We want to set for level flight, and we want to see what kind of speed we can get out of this thing. As you can see, we're sitting there around, if we look closely there, what is it, around 130? So at this setting, and we're still climbing a bit, so I got to level it and then get a good reading. And as I level it, I'm going to increase the MP to around 40. instead of 35. I want to get 140 miles per hour. And in all my tests, that's the setting that we need. So here I've got it set now. I increased that while I was talking. And now I've got it level flight. Take a look there. Level flight and 140 miles per hour. There I am. There's my cruise configuration. My MP ended up at 40. My RPMs ended up at 2250. And whatever that altitude is, you can see it's rock steady, and my vertical speed indicator is there in the middle. So there I'm getting, actually if I look very closely, I'm getting 137 or so. Not quite 140 yet, but that's close enough. I mean, that's giving you an idea of how to set cruise in the plane. And then now the engineer monitors all the temperatures and pressures and make sure that we're okay as we go along. You should do the same. Take it up, do some tests like this. Here I'm looking at the views. I can't help it, you guys. What does that view look like in level flight? And although I've got a foggy area out here right now, it's pretty overcast. That's the view right there. Different than when you're sitting on the water. This level view in flight. You can see the horizon's up there pretty much at the top of that window. Great stuff. Love it. Absolutely. Taking this legend out for a spin, which you certainly can't do in real life, and certainly enjoying it. So we pulled back the MP and we've been descending all along, and what we want to do is just check this plane. I want to do a nice side view again. Let's see if we can do this a little bit more gently. Almost at idle, just enough to keep voltages going. Leveling off. As you see the shadow come close to the plane, you want to make sure that's a nice gentle transition to the water. And you can see there, first it hit the right float, the right wing float, and the wing float settled the plane level. You really want to land level. And so this is my first attempt. What I'm going to do is a few more attempts. Here, let's take a look at the second attempt, where I'm going to come in a lot gentler, and I'm going to make it level so I don't touch, or try not to touch, the wing tips. The wing tips can actually make the plane yaw, and it can actually hurt them a lot too. So let's try this second attempt. Now, as you notice in here, my speed is close to stall. It's actually dangerously close. It should be a little higher. Haven't stalled yet, so I'm good. I gave it a little more power. It's somewhere around 13 MP, just to show you. I want to let you see the outside of the plane as we come in to see this. And the whole idea is transition from that level flight down to the water. Now, like with all landings, you pull the nose up to flare. Here we don't have to pull the nose up to flare. We're losing speed fast enough, we're losing altitude fast enough. What we want to do is level it up so that it's a gentle touch on the water. Now, while we're doing this view here, we're looking ahead at logs, submerged objects, fishermen, any boats that are in the way. Hopefully we see them from ahead of time. Let's go back to the outside view. Here we've got full flaps on the left part. We've got some trim on that too. As it levels off to level flight, you can see it coming close to the water. This time, a lot more gentle. Let's see what happens here. As I pull back a bit, there we go. The speed's good. The engines are good. I'm slowly getting near the water, and I should be touching the main body if I've got this level enough. No, I got a left wing float touching this barely. Okay, there's level. Okay, now I can pull the power and let it sink in more. It's still just touching the surface, and there it sinks in. And there it's on the main part of the airplane, and now I cut throttles. You can see the propellers there changing already. And now you decide whether you want to have 13 on the MP gauge for a fast taxi. While you're already up to speed, just come down to the fast taxi speed, or take it down so that to 10 for the normal taxi warm-up MP setting. So that's how it's done. Not so hard. If you've done float planes before, you'll certainly know how to approach and land, even if you do a precautionary first to make sure there's nothing in the way. And this was very gratifying to be able to do this. On the Twitch channel a few days ago, I didn't land it very nicely. I came in too sharp, tried to pull up, and the weight of the plane, you could tell it was a bit of a chunk. I mean, who knew? Is that cool or what? That is so cool. We want to turn to the right, though. We're going to be landing over to the right there. There you're seeing North Vancouver over there. This is not Vancouver Island, you guys. This is Vancouver City. There's a confusion there with some people who haven't been here before. Vancouver Island's behind us where Victoria is. We're heading over to... Listen to the engines. Oh my gosh. We're heading over this way. This way, Howard. This way. Somebody was behind us. There he is. Look, 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 look.
That's me right in front of you there.
Oh my gosh. Look at this, you guys.
Pee-wee Craig is about to go by in front of you.
Oh my
Fox
gosh.
is directly in front of that. Grubius Doom is coming up on your left. And FD is on your right, a little astern.
Oh my gosh, you guys. And we're heading into this area right here. There is a gap. Actually, we're going to land. See this gap right here? We're going to land right here. This is actually Vancouver Harbor here. We're going to come in through that gap. There's the park on the left and the city on the right. We're going to go right in there. It doesn't have to take long, you know. It doesn't have to be a long flight. We just have to get it right. Mamma mia.
And Dale just appeared in the Hercules H-4, so now there's another one.
I'll just get this set up just so I know where I'm going. And then I'll go out and look at some more views. Oh my gosh. Who knew? Thanks for coming, you guys, and thanks for flying the Goose. There, let's see. Come on, give me a positive rate, Howard. Am I not getting a positive rate? Have I got this thing set for like maximum weight? Huh. Okay, right about there. Stay steady. Oh my gosh, listen to that thing behind me. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, there's the city over there. Yep. Oh, I see where we are. Okay. There we go. Turn it right, everybody. Going right, going in. All right, so I'm going to start setting this up for descent, and then I'll set it up for a landing. We are not far off the water already, so we have to be careful. As you can see, what are we? How far off the water are we? 2,000 feet? Okay, good enough. There's where we want to go. You can see the city on the right. There's where we want to go. It didn't look right over there. It was too many, no buildings. You see this thing as I was overshooting is like, oh, whoa, whoa. And you really want to start getting smoother with that and anticipating that. All right. Now I want to cut back. Gee whiz, I'm overshooting again while I'm looking at instruments. There, like that. All right, I'm going to cut back a little. I keep feeling like I should get higher up because I feel like I'm going to hit the ground, but I'm not. I'm at 2,000 feet on a, a sea level area. So this is it. Sort of like this. And we're going in for a landing. So landing, I don't know if it gave us landing numbers. It gave us climb. It gave us cruise. So, we're just going to remember 110 knots. Less than 110 knots, we can put flaps down. We're going to need flaps to land, right? So right now, we're nowhere near 110 knots. We're like close to stall, believe it or not, as we go in. And so now, and I'm actually climbing, so that's why we're close to stall. So let me just adjust some trim, head down toward the runway area. That's it in front of me, right there. And start setting up for that actual approach. And once we can put flaps down anytime, but right now we're already slow. So I'm going to put flaps down as we get closer. We don't want to fly right over the city, but there's a nice little gap right here. I've seen planes actually come through it in real life, because that is an actual seaplane base. A lot of harbor airplanes come right through there. A lot of them will come in from this side when the winds are favoring it. But, certainly they can come from this direction. What were you going to say, Andrew?
Flap limits when power on is 110, and if you have power off, it's 122.
Oh. Huh. So, like I'm doing right now, I'm on a descent. I've just cut my power on the descent. I could still put flaps now to make sure I don't go over 110. And you can see I've only got something like 300 feet per minute. See, the one lower on my right here is in a good position. That's a perfect position right there. I'm not in the perfect position, but I'm getting there. This is good here. Whoever's flying, is that you, Flox? That's a perfect position for this.
In front of you there a little bit, yeah.
All right, now I'm going to go to 20 degrees of flap. I'm going to pull up right through that gap right there, you guys, separating the park from the city. And my stall speed is actually almost at stall. I'm going to give it some more power with the extra flaps. This thing is barn doors, you guys. Look at that. Unbelievable. And you come in pretty low, actually, through here. I'm sitting at, what am I sitting at? Still around 1,800 feet, so it's still way too high. For some reason, I keep thinking I'm lower. And I'm going to be landing just after that little island there that you see. up by where Flox is. He's probably going to turn right because there's a lot of boats in that harbor, and we got to get down by the boats and get past them. And we'll just do it like this again. And I'm going to do one more flap. And I probably would have come in a lot shallower than that, but that's all right. We'll work it. L4 with floats, guys, right behind you. Okay. Mr. Rees, how you doing? Thanks for following. Differential propping, yeah. Yeah, you can. I think that's what I showed you guys. Look at this view. Actually, there's a better view. Look. There's the view. Ooh! Ooh! That's a beautiful view. Let's see what my speed is. My speed is 70, 80, 85 knots. Okay. I can take that. MP's low. I've got it pretty much idling coming in. Do a dead stick landing, you guys. I'm going to move over here. I got to make sure this wingspan doesn't chop off some skyscrapers. So I got to kind of come over this way, edge my way over to the harbor, or fly over that little island. But, you know, I like the challenge, so let's do it this way. As I pull up, I got to give it some power. It takes a while to spool it up because as I pull up, I'm going to lose speed. Just like that. Don't worry, I don't have to put gear out or gear in, or there's no gear. So that's not one checklist item we need. Be careful, Howard. You're going to slice that skyscraper. Ooh. Hello, Vancouver. All right, now I can go down. I'm past those. Whew. All right, one last flap and we're in. Now, typically, this is the touchdown point, pretty much where that fuel depot is. There's a fuel depot on the left. If you look out my left window, right here. Let me just get that left window going. There's the fuel depot right there. Pulling it up. Pulling it up. The angle coming in on the water, of course this thing's going to bounce. Everybody inside is going to get jostled. Let me come down here a bit and do a proper landing like you're seeing up ahead. There we go. Let's try that. All right, let's do that from the outside view. And we'll come in nice and gentle as we take the mast off that one sailboat. Pulling back some power now. Pulling back some power.
Oh, that might have been treetop in that sailboat.
That's treetop. I think I sliced the treetop. And I should be seeing somewhere around here. Whoa. There we are. Nice little touch. Pull back a bit and we're down. And I'm on idle while I touch down. Should have gone from this side, except my hat switch isn't working. Two spruces in the water at the same time. Oh my gosh, it's a Spruce Goose convention. Is that cool or what? And so now I'm going to just cut the engine so I don't drift away from you guys. Let's come down here and just do that. But I do agree the checklist would be the better way to do all that. But we're gonna have to. We definitely have to take a picture of this. This has been recording the whole time too. I've been recording it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. And that poor sailboat back there. I took the mast right off the thing. So that's definitely worth a picture right there, you guys. This little, you know, this is actually a luxury yacht, you guys. This is a huge luxury yacht worth millions. And look at how it's dwarfed by these things. Well, how did you do? Here you can see I've actually docked right here at Toronto Island Airport. And I've just docked here on the mainland here, somewhere around where the Kayama cruise ship is, the tall ship. And man, it's big. It's huge. I can't believe how big it is compared to the normal countryside. So, you know, comments, how did you do? Comments, suggestions for beginners, anyone else who wants to try this, what are your thoughts about it? And certainly put those into the chat area, the comments area here at YouTube, and let us know your thoughts about flying this airplane and what your experience was with it. It's always interesting to hear that. And any constructive criticism you have, something I've missed, something I'm wrong with, let me know, you know, and that's always helpful to all the others also. All right. Your participation makes it more fun. Wait till you know, you guys saw it. You saw all those airplanes in the air and it's like, wow, you know, that makes it more fun when you have more people. You have people asking questions in chat. You have this interaction going on like a normal classroom, normal workshop. So that's a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you guys joining in for that. If you do happen to get a chance, Go see this movie. Leonardo DiCaprio did a great job of the eccentric person who is Howard Hughes, and he did a great job. It was very believable. As with any Hollywood movie, you're not sure how much is true and how much isn't. If you get a chance to join our Twitch channel, then just look for ForderLearnToFly on Twitch and come follow me on Twitter. I announce when most of my streams are flying. Thank you everyone for joining me on this YouTube video session. They're quite lengthy. They have to be. We dive deeper than just a glance at a plane. It's not a first look. It's not a spawn on a runway and hit the throttle. As you can see, it's a lot deeper than that. Skim through the parts you really like. Come back and look at the more detailed parts later. Certainly grab a manual and get to know the airplane well. There's no finer feeling than coming in for a landing and confidently landing at the right speeds, the right direction, and without bouncing around. These things make us feel a whole lot better when we're flying in the sim because we're mastering the skill of flying that particular airplane at the time. Thank you for joining us. Leave me some comments, like and subscribe if you wish, and we'll see you again in the next video.